Welcome to this new episode of the Developer Lab podcast, the show where we explore how modern companies build and grow developer products. My guest today is Prashant, who is the VP of Developer Relations and Marketing at Tinybird, the real-time platform for data and engineering teams. Previously, he was VP of Developer Relations and Marketing at Timescale, where he helped the time series database to grow from early stage to scale. Prashant is looking back on a 25 years career, including senior management positions at Microsoft, Twitter, Facebook, and AWS. Notably, he led the marketing product team that built Visual Studio, turning it into a $1.2 billion business for Microsoft. He's also actively advising startups and writing about his experiences in his developer relations newsletter. Hi, Prashant. Thanks a lot for joining me today for this episode of the Developer Lab podcast. Maybe to get started, having worked as a VP of Developer Relations and Marketing 2 times now, where do you kind of draw the line between those 2 areas? And do you even think it should exist, or is it like always 2 areas that should be combined?
Awesome. And first of all, thank you for inviting me to join you. I really appreciate that. For what I do, for my role, the 2 are very fused together. Typically, however, on my teams, I usually have someone who leads the developer advocacy effort, and then I have someone who leads the marketing effort. Because I specialize in companies that are earlier stage and help them get to scale, what I usually do is start with someone who leads the advocacy effort. And then over time, I will bring in someone who leads the marketing effort. But for me and in my position, I look at them both together and holistically.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks a lot. Looking back at your career, what would you say, what were the biggest mistakes that you did in the last 25 years marketing to developers?
I think I'll categorize them in terms of 3 mistakes. And I'll say first is career mistakes. Second one is minor mistakes that are you can learn from. And the third one is sort of more bigger mistakes that you should try and avoid, what I did. From a career perspective, a lot of times in the early part of my career, I kind of channeled a more conservative voice in my head about jobs to take. I started my career at Sun working as a Java evangelist, but I was given an opportunity early on in my career to go to a startup. And, when you're young and in your early 20s, in my case, I was 19 and 20 years old when I was at Sun, a lot of my career advice and my career expertise and the ability to navigate my career came from what I observed in my parents. And so early in my career, I made, I would say, bad mistakes in opting for the safe conservative route, in this case, staying at Sun and eventually going to Microsoft, versus a more adventurous route, in this case, joining a startup. Eventually, that startup did exit for billions of dollars. I would have been very happy as a result. But of course, the fullness of time in my life is a very great life, and everything else I'm very happy about. But I think career mistakes early on in your career, you should take more chances. I think getting a year or so under your belt at one of the big companies is a great thing, but you should quickly move on to things that are more adventurous, spreading your wings, getting an opportunity to learn more, do more, and kind of grow your skill set faster. And so that's like kind of first mistake I made early on in my career. And it turns out I repeated that mistake many times, where I opted for a conservative approach rather than something that was more aggressive, either starting my own thing when I had opportunities to do so, or joining early stage startups that ended up doing quite well when I had an opportunity to do so. And instead, I opted for the conservative route. And I think if you look at my resume and looked at my LinkedIn, you can see that conservative route play out quite a bit. And I would encourage folks early in their career, particularly, to take less conservative choices. I'd say the second kind of category mistake or minor mistakes that you learn from. At a time at Microsoft, back in the day, we shipped software in boxes. They came with CDs or discs in boxes. I know that'll shock a lot of people, but that was the way we did it in the old days. And Visual Studio was no exception. We had a box of Visual Studio product with a bunch of CDs inside. And in Visual Studio 2005, I decided I wanted to put API posters in there. So, API diagrams for, in this case, the .NET class library. But I wanted on one side for there to be an API diagram, but the other side, I didn't want it to be boring. So I ended up hiring a bunch of comic book artists to create comic book characters out of Visual Studio, one of which was Captain Infinity. He was a superhero, kind of like Green Lantern / Superman, who had a ring, which was the Visual Studio Infinity symbol. And I put a bunch of these comic book posters in the boxes of Visual Studio. And we were ready to go to print and everything else. And then I heard from someone in a couple of different countries that one of these posters was actually offensive to the culture from that region. And this is something that had not occurred to me as someone who didn't travel the world a lot and didn't really experience different cultures in that regard. It was very surprising to me, but it taught me a lot, which is when you're working on any product, it's super important to get as many different perspectives as possible, to get as many different viewpoints as possible, to get a diverse array of opinions and input throughout the product development process, throughout the marketing process, throughout everything. And so even today, that lesson I've internalized quite a bit. And today, what I do, even whether it's product naming, whether it's positioning and taglines and messaging and websites and so forth, regardless of what it is, one of the things I endeavor to do is to build a very diverse panel of people who will give me input and who will, help me progress the marketing strategy or marketing tactics before it becomes too late to reverse it. And I think having the diversity of opinion is really important. A third category of things I think are major mistakes. So when you are a new leader and you step into a role, you typically will step into a role at a startup that is in one of two phases. Either you have a small team and you need to build it out, or you'll step into a role where there is a large existing team and you need to kind of make sense of what's going on. And so what I did, I joined a startup. It didn't work out for me in the sense that I didn't really enjoy it. The founders didn't really enjoy having me around. And it was just one of those things where I joined the startup at a large existing team. And I just really struggled to figure out how to get the various pieces of this team to work within my system and within the way I think and the way I kind of think about marketing and developer marketing in particular. And it turns out the biggest mistake there was me trying to impose my system and my way of doing business upon an existing team rather than me internalizing how the existing team functions, how the existing team works, what are their strengths and weaknesses, and then adapting myself to the existing team. And then over time, merging that with company strategy and things that I wanted to do. And I think, this is a kind of a typical mistake for an early career stage leader who steps into an existing situation. And it's something that I've had to do several times since. And the lessons I learned the really hard way, it's like touching a very hot stove. It was that painful for me. The lessons that I learned, I've definitely internalized over time, which is to really take good understanding, spend a lot of time getting a good understanding of your people. What are their strengths and weaknesses? What is the culture of the company and the strengths and weaknesses of the culture? And then adapting yourself to both. It's something that all leaders, I think, should do more of, being more adaptable. And in this case, is something that I had to learn the hard way.
Cool. Yeah, thanks a lot for sharing that advice. What would you say was the biggest learning you made about marketing to developers? What was like one thing that completely surprised you when you figured it out?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I started out my career as a developer. I was a software developer, and I mean, I still write code just for fun. I think all the really great software marketers and certainly developer advocates spend a lot of time writing code and tinkering these days. I spend, just a couple of weeks ago, I wanted to learn a new kind of JavaScript framework, and I decided to just plunge a weekend into it and kind of tinker around. So I think as a developer, the thing you realize is you just want to be told the facts. Let me then go off and experience it for myself and then determine whether it's right for me. And there are two really important things that come out of that for developer marketing. I think the first thing is that developer marketing needs to be factual. It needs to be truthful. You have to be very careful with your hyperbole. I mean, all marketers to some extent bring in hyperbole. I mean, it's part of the job. But with developer marketing and with developer products, you have to really attune your hyperbole to your audience. And in this case, an audience that is sometimes skeptical, but very much dependent and expecting of facts. So that's not new. I think anyone who's in developer marketing, that's sort of the first thing you hear, which is developers are no BS people. They want just the facts and they want to proceed. So I think everyone understands that. The second thing I think that being a developer and kind of experiencing the product has taught me is that with developer marketing, the dividends, the payoff, can typically happen weeks or months, maybe even a year later. And what that means for us is that when you do any kind of marketing program, any kind of go-to-market tactic in marketing, you are trying to get developers to come and know who you are, understand who you are, maybe even experience your product for a little bit. And then they may come back 3-4 weeks or months later when they actually have a problem that's applicable to you. So in typical B2B SaaS marketing, you create this nurture stream. Someone signs up for your product, you're kind of peppering them every day, every week, et cetera, to get them to finish a sign up, to kind of use the product. With developer marketing, your nurture stream is really all about, hey, this is a new capability that you may not have seen in our product. Let us know if we can help. Here's another capability you may not have seen. Let me know how you can help. And the goal is to give the developer, over the course of their first experience with your product, a good understanding of who you are and the problems you solve, so that they may, when they have that problem, you are top of mind. You're kind of filed in the back, in the recesses of their brain, so that they say, hey, I've got this problem. I know the product. I've seen this product before that can help me solve it. And then they come back to you. So you have to kind of approach it as the long game. And I think developer marketing really is the long game, much more so than B2B SaaS, and certainly much more so than consumer.
Do you think other marketeers could learn something from developer marketeers? Because if I look at the things that you just listed, I mean, that's something I also care about. And I'm technical, but I'm definitely not the typical developer persona, right? But if I look at other B2B SaaS tools, I'm also looking for the facts. I also don't want to have bullshit. I want to have like actually features rather than benefits and those kind of things. Do you think that will spread in the long term?
I mean, I actually think, if you look at B2B SaaS in general, business software in general, it has become massively consumerized over the last 25 years. I've been in business since the beginning. It's become massively consumerized, where try before you buy, use your Hotmail or Gmail account to sign up and then kind of get going and running. That's, the normal. That's de rigueur for business software now. And then it makes sense that, even typical B2B SaaS products would also think about the long game. However, there's one very important difference, which is in typical B2B SaaS software, let's take Airtable as an example. The payoff of using something like Airtable would be almost immediate. When I first used Airtable, I signed up immediately. This was at Microsoft. We weren't really allowed to use it. We used it anyway in our division. And I signed up immediately and have never looked back since. Every job I've had since, the backbone of how we track everything is Airtable. But the way Airtable pays, once you sign up for Airtable, you should see immediately the value and you should begin using it. So a lot of B2B SaaS products, the payoff is immediate. The payoff should be immediate. I should immediately get the value out of using it. Developer products are very different. Let's say you're trying to sell a new database or a new JavaScript framework. And a developer, in order to use a new database or a new JavaScript framework, they need to rip out something they already have. They need to build a lot of things around it, maybe, before they can start using it in its fullest. And so developers are thinking, before I even take the plunge and saying, I'm going to use this, I'm going to commit to this product, they have to think through all the ramifications of using that product. It's not just kind of slap something in and now you're really productive as a team. You're slapping something in, you're building the CI/CD around it, you're building APIs around it, you're building the observability around it. And then you can, once you've thought through all of that, then you can say, okay, I'm going to commit to this product at this price point, and I'm going to commit to these other products at these price points, and I'm going to commit a product team to implement everything and pull it all together. So a typical developer product is not an immediate payoff like a typical B2B product. So I think the principles of developer marketing could apply to B2B marketing for sure. And I think just the facts, zero BS, absolutely, 100%. That should be marketing. But the expectation and the way you run your nurture streams, the way you run your go-to-market, I think has to necessarily be quite different for a developer than it is for B2B.
Yeah, that's a very valid point. You wrote a very great piece about PLG developer products. I also going to link to it in the show notes. Do you think any developer product should follow a PLG motion? And if not, what's the criteria for choosing if PLG is the right go-to-market motion for you?
This is the question of our time. And I think there's a lot of things to kind of unpack there and kind of think through. So let me kind of see if I can do that. So the first thing is, as a human being, as a person, I'm always skeptical of absolutes, whether it's my personal life, whether it's politics, whether it's whatever. I'm always skeptical of absolutes because I don't think they're fully fleshed out ideas. So for me, I don't think that a PLG motion is the only way to go, nor do I think top-down sales is the only way to go. There are other kind of go-to-market motions, partnerships, and so forth. And I think what you're looking for when you're building a business is to try and be anti-fragile so that you can have multiple vectors towards success. You have multiple vectors at one time, which may be more successful than another, and you can put a little bit more effort into that, but you always want to have optionality. And so in a typical go-to-market motion, I think a quality kind of go-to-market motion for a developer product, you're going to have one cohort of customers that are going to be driven primarily by PLG. These may be smaller companies. They may be like I was at Microsoft. Microsoft, of course, is a ginormous company. My division at Microsoft, my team was about 200 people. My division was about 2,000 people, and we used Airtable. And so I did that through a pure PLG motion. If I had to sign up and talk to someone at sales and get a contract, there's no way I could have been able to use a product like Airtable at Microsoft. Getting a contract approved would have taken forever. But in this case, I was able to sign up to use the product. So at a departmental level, PLG really enabled me in that case. So PLG has, I think, a very strong purpose, and you can certainly build a motion that grows a PLG customer into a enterprise kind of contract customer as well. And obviously it's proven many, many times in our industry that you can do that. And so as a developer product, I think a PLG motion, whether it's a free trial, whether it's a free tier, and there are pros and cons to both, whatever you makes sense for your product, I think a PLG motion makes a lot of sense. At Tinybird, we have a free tier. It's a very generous free tier. You can basically run your home projects. You can do your POCs very quickly, very easily with a free tier. And I think that motion is a very strong one. But I also believe very strongly in top-down sales. There are a lot of companies that will only, with a developer product, and certainly like Tinybird, which is an infrastructure product, they need to go through security review. They need to go through all these different stages of the purchasing process for them. And we've won a lot of pretty substantial deals as a result of a top-down sales motion, a lot of times leads driven out of events, where we meet someone at an event, at a trade show, we work that lead and then we progress it towards a contract stage. And that's been very successful for us from a revenue standpoint. So I think a mix of both makes a lot of sense. And I think the flexibility of a PLG motion gives you a lot of opportunities to see customers and meet customers that you may not have ordinarily had a chance with if you're starting a contract.
Yeah, super interesting. We like to call it developer-led growth because the interesting thing about PLG for developer products is, so the individual who signs up for your product and kind of goes through this PLG funnel is almost never their economic buyer that you're going to sell to later if you decide to add a sales motion to it. And I think that's something very unique about developer products, that you almost always have this at least two personas, right? You have like the user, the champion who's the developer, and then at some point you have like the management buyer who's like, rather addressed by a top-down sales motion. If you say, okay, you also do top-down sales via events and so on, does your PLG product still play a role? So do you still see, hey, we have them in the sales process, and then suddenly developers from that company start to sign up for the product and start playing around with it? So it's still a sales tool then, I guess, right?
Yeah. Let me describe really quickly how we build out our PLG and kind of how I conceptually think about it. So from a PLG point of view, I use a kind of thought framework that I call ACEs. So first mission is to drive awareness. The next mission is to drive conversion into a sign up. The next mission is to drive expansion, which is people actually using the product. And then you're building S, the system. So ACES, ACES, awareness, conversion, expansion, and then the systems that help you measure and dashboards and things like that. And so that is sort of the things I kind of build around PLG. In the awareness bucket, that's where you're building content, you're doing a lot of free growth activities. We can talk about all the stuff that we do around there, around SEO, around SEM, so paid acquisition. But that's really about getting people into your funnel. And then once they're in the funnel, and that's on our website, basically, and having a really good website. So then we have to get to conversion, which is, okay, someone's on our website and we think systematically about the website and what do we improve in the website? What content do we need to add to the website? What do we need to change on the homepage in order to affect the conversion into a sign up? So ACEs on the A, awareness, the metric is how many unique website visitors do we get every month. The conversion metric is how many signups and what percentage of the website visitors ended up becoming a sign up. And then we get to someone signed up. And then we enter a nurture stream, and then we have one automated nurture stream. And then we also have a manual nurture stream going on in parallel, where if someone exceeds a certain threshold of whether they ingest data in our case, or create a bunch of APIs, or whatever kind of metrics you have in your mind, if they exceed that in their initial 1 to 2 weeks, then we kind of plop them out of the automated nurture, and we have a Slack channel where we get a Slack alert, and then someone manually reaches out and says, hey, can I help you? And what are you trying to build? And it's basically consulting. And our SEs, our sales engineers, basically act as consultants or advisors in helping someone become successful with the product and generally with their project. We actually don't discriminate on that. For us, it's a win if we help someone be successful with their project. And so on that bridge between conversion and expansion, what we're looking at is how much data do people ingest, how many, and various other metrics that we care about. And we have both an automated stream as well as a manual stream that happens if someone exceeds threshold. So that's the kind of way we think about it. For us, we started instituting this about in April, and we've been kind of perfecting it over the last month or so. And over the last 4 months, each month of the last 4 months, we've set records in terms of signups and engagement once someone has signed up. So, and we haven't just been setting monthly records, we've been shattering the previous month's record. And it's kind of neat to be in a hockey stick for a change rather than a kind of plateau. But for us, this kind of conceptual model has been working really well for us.
In a previous conversation, you mentioned kind of 3 main channels, and you also kind of briefly touched them just now, namely content, events, and paid ads. I think content is kind of very common sense, but I definitely hear less often that people do paid ads for developer products. And I think it's probably controversial to do so, because there's people that say, hey, ads don't work for developers. And I think I read one of your blogs and you said they just work fine as for any other B2B audience. What's your kind of take on that? Is there maybe like a good time or even the right product for ads, or anything you should watch out for if you're a startup and thinking about, hey, should I do ads or not?
Yeah, so ads definitely work for developers. In my experience, about 30% of developers will turn on ad blockers and never see your ad, whether it's on Google or wherever. But that leaves 70% that do, and that may or may not engage with the ad. I personally almost never click on an ad in Google. I usually go and enter the URL manually and then go. But I mean, that's just this pattern that I have always followed. But from my experience, we do see that as well. So, but let's actually go step backward, because content and ads, even events to some extent, are all interrelated. It is one kind of big bubble. And in order to get that right, you need to do a bunch of things first. And a lot of these things have to be founder-led, but by necessity, it's the founder who has the moral authority to kind of drive this, which is all of the customer discovery and the messaging discovery. Now, certainly marketing and my product marketing team, I always expect to be part of messaging discovery and customer discovery. But this is a morally kind of for moral authority in the company who comes from the founders, and the founders really need to internalize this is who our customer is and what the problem is that we're solving. So every developer product solves a problem. And that implies that you have a problem and you have a solution. So I'm kind of breaking it down to the basics. Everything has a problem and a solution. And you get into trouble when you don't define your problem crisply enough and you don't define your solution crisply enough. And so in order to get really crisp on your problem and your solution, you need to do a lot of research. And so you know kind of the ballpark, hey, I'm trying to solve this problem. I have a new JavaScript framework. I'm going to make JavaScript a lot easier, building websites a lot easier for people. So I'm going to spend time on the subreddits, the Discords, the Slacks, the forums, wherever people congregate online and maybe even in person with meetups and events. I'm going to be there and and listen. I'm going to offer my advice, not as a product pitching person, but as a fellow nerd. I'm going to offer advice. I'm going to offer technical acumen. I'm going to offer my experience. I'm going to be part of this community. I'm going to listen. And I'm going to listen for how people frame the problem, how people describe the problem, the words they use, the adjectives, verbs, look for things with exclamation points. I can't effing believe that this is so hard. Look for those kind of things. And you're spending time with communities to really internalize the problem. And, it may be the case that you are defining a problem that's not really a problem, right? And that is also, now is the time to fix that before it's too late. But, you're spending time in all these forums to understand the problem and get really, really crisp at the problem. And then you're talking about, this is how my company and my product can solve that problem. By spending time early on, working as a team early on to define that problem and that solution, you then move to the next phase, which is, let me describe that problem and that solution and the various kind of avenues that I have at my disposal. One of which is content. I always encourage people, hey, take what you've learned and write a thought leadership piece about the problem that the industry is facing, the history of that problem, why previous attempts at solving it have failed, and why right now, today, we need a new type of solution. And this is what we're doing. Write that and see what kind of traction you get. See if it gets traction on Hacker News, see if it gets traction on these various forums. You're kind of writing a white paper and you're kind of learning from how people react to it. So that's sort of the kind of flagship content piece. And then you're building content on top of that to describe the problem. And it's more fully to basically earn credibility in the market about being an expert on the problem. And you're writing content about how you solve the problem and hoping that it resonates with this audience. And you're constantly improving that loop. Now that informs that whole process, including the content development, informs your ads, because your ads, you kind of divide up your ads. Let's just talk about AdWords, for example. You're looking at the keywords. What are people searching for when they have this problem? You don't know the keywords unless you've done the research about how people describe the problem in these various forms. So get your keywords right. And then the creative, like what are you going to display when someone has those keywords in your ad? That comes, again, from all the research you've done on these various forums, listening to how people describe the problem and like what they're looking for to solve it. And then you have the landing page, and the landing page, you are describing the problem really quickly and then what you do to solve it, and then sign up now or whatever CTA you want. And I definitely encourage experimenting with CTAs. For us, we're currently in a sign up now phase, but in September and October, we are going to add new CTAs. One's going to be download an ebook, and the other one's going to be contact sales. So we're going to run ABC testing in parallel throughout September and October on all our ads. To see if we can improve the quality of signups and the quality of engagement that we get out of our ads. But your landing page internalizes that problem and that solution that you've been researching. And then your follow-up, your nurture off of someone who signs up from an ad is also lined up with the problem and the solution that you described. So, doing that homework early on about, doing all the free growth stuff, which is participating in forums and answering questions and being part of communities. It's all free growth. That's what, if you are seed stage and early A stage, early series A, that's what you should be doing all of, spending all of your energy getting the word out on various forums and listening a lot. And then you kind of get into content marketing and SEO. And then you're thinking about, okay, now I've got a stable of content. I understand the problem and the solution really well. And then you're layering in ads. Events is actually, to me, a ton of fun. I think, I've worked at big companies where the pendulum has swung back and forth. I've heard, at Microsoft, we're not doing any events this year. And then we're going to go to all the events. And I hear the same thing at Google. I talk to my, friends at Google, we're not doing any events this year. And then next year, they're at all the events. And to me, events are really important. I think we spent, all of us, 2.5 to 3 years not seeing anyone in person. And we have all learned the value of seeing people in person, and seeing people face to face and getting to make friends and getting to make new friends and see old friends. And I think that is something that's really important. to build connection, to build your profile. And so events are really important, but you're internalizing at events that problem and solution framework again, because you need to make sure your booth is blaring that problem. We're at Google Cloud Next right now. Tinybird's at Google Cloud Next right now. And I seriously screwed up the signage on this booth. The booth signage was due three months ago. And the signage on this booth reflects our messaging from 3 months ago, or it doesn't reflect anything we've learned over the last 3 months. And I'm like, I'm sitting here thinking, events are super important for connection. You're internalizing that problem and solution framework again. The things you give away at your booth, the demos you do are all about that. So all of these things are very interrelated. And I think they all come from a very good understanding of your customer and understanding that problem and solution.
I can definitely relate to the booth issue. We also faced it. I think the earlier you are there, the more often your messaging probably changes. Yeah,
that's actually really important. I mean, a lot of folks don't understand this. That positioning and messaging changes constantly, and you are, as a company, particularly as a startup, you are constantly evolving your positioning and messaging. When I started my career at Sun and then later Microsoft, we would create these beautiful positioning framework documents, these beautiful kind of Word documents in landscape format with 3 pillars and all these little blocks all over it that had text in them. And that was sort of like, hey, I built the positioning framework and I'm going to hand it to all of you. I'm going to bless all of you with this beautiful positioning framework. And in reality, your positioning changes constantly and your messaging certainly changes constantly. And your positioning is like, okay, we've got a competitor, or Microsoft just entered the market, or Google just entered the market. And that's really crowded. So we've got to change who we are and we've got to find our niche. And that's part of the game. That's the business. And being flexible and adaptable, creating a communication style as a leader, particularly as a founder, but certainly as a marketing leader, where you are, you build this trust with your team where you say, hey, look, this is business. Things change. And, this is what we used to be. But, because of these reasons, we need to be this now. And the way you communicate that change and the way you walk people through that change with confidence, I think is the hallmark of a leader in this day and age.
Yeah, I think it cannot be emphasized enough how important messaging is. And I guess in my opinion, message market fit even comes before, should come before product market fit. Do you have any tips on how to actually organize that research? Because I think a lot of folks know that they have to work on this, but as you said, it's constantly changing. If you just put everything into a nice slide, it's not really it's hard to iterate on that. How do you kind of organize all that research, all that messaging? Do you have any tips on that?
Yeah, for sure. I think the first thing is to not put yourself on an island. Whether you're a founder or a CMO, you're not the only person that should be working on this. You should be gathering feedback, gathering input, putting it in Google Docs, putting it in on G Drive or Dropbox, all the the videos of the interviews you've had with people. Let anyone in your marketing team, let anyone in your company kind of see that. Take videos and generate the transcripts and have the transcripts on them so they're searchable inside your G Drive. All those things, make sure all that stuff is available to everyone. Socialize it to everyone. If you've got a Notion or a Wiki, when you've met with a new customer, make sure everyone in the company knows, hey, I met with this customer. Here are the meeting notes. Here's the video, etc. And you don't know who in your company is going to have the time at that moment to click and then watch the video. And, the good ideas come from everywhere in your company. You hire great people and you let them be great. So don't, number one, feel the pressure that you're the only person responsible for positioning and messaging. It is, the founders are the ultimate responsibility for positioning and messaging, but everyone in the company should be contributing their viewpoints and their input on how we talk about who we are and what our problems are, et cetera. And so I think that's the first and most important thing, is to keep those communication lines open for everyone. And then second is, in that same vein, we have video interviews that we do with all of our customers. I actually don't attend a lot of those video interviews. I watch them after the fact because I don't want to crowd the Zoom and kind of intimidate the customer. And so as a consequence, I watch the video and then I follow along on the transcript. And then I start highlighting key phrases that I thought were interesting. And then, you look at the commonalities across all these different interview docs, you see these key phrases, and then you begin to pull things out that say, hey, this looks actually pretty common. This is a common way of phrasing this problem that I'm seeing across all these different customers. And that actually has worked quite well for me. I suspect this will be very easy to do with ChatGPT, or with Bard or what have you. But right now, for me, I actually like reading the transcripts. I like watching the video. I like internalizing the customer's language and vocabulary, and really kind of putting myself in their shoes as I watch the video.
Okay, and then you kind of have a Google Doc template or something like that you just go on and you update it from time to time, where you just say, hey, this is a problem that we're solving. This is our value proposition. This is our target persona, and so on. And you just do this as a regular exercise, or how do you go about that?
I mean, I think, what typically has happened at all the companies I've worked at, and even Microsoft is no exception, is you learn a lot about your customer and your market. And then you say, you know what, actually, this is how we need to talk about who we are. And this is what we need to be, which could mean we need to emphasize these product changes versus other ones. We need to go build these features and, put these other ones behind. And so there, a lot of these changes kind of come out of positioning and messaging changes. And then, really, I'm a doc person. I think I worked at Microsoft for a long time. In the early 2000s, where I was kind of known for having this 800 slide PowerPoint that described what I thought Visual Studio 2005 should be. And I had an actual printout of it, which was embarrassing. And I would take from meeting to meeting, and I would work with different product feature areas on different features and how I thought things should be. And so as a product manager, that's kind of how I managed that product. But over time, at Amazon, when I went to Amazon, of course, is famously a writing culture, 6-page narrative with appendices. And so I, as a former writer, screenwriter, and novelist, I took to writing like a fish in water, and it was an awesome revelation to me. And so now I've become very much a narrative person, and I write docs for everything. And in this case, for new positioning and messaging, I will write a doc that lays out what we are, why we've changed, and like what we hope this change will result in. And then that we circulate. Again, you have to do these changes in a very progressive way, in the sense that you've got to bring people along when you make a big change, a company change. You can't just say, hey, this is what we are. Let's go sail this direction. All your sailors will look at you like, well, we were going this way. Why are we going this way now? Do you really know what you're doing? You need to, as a leader, bring that change in a very confident way and bring everyone along with you. So from a practical point of view, I write docs, but from an implementation point of view, that's sort of the art of leadership, where you're bringing people along as you're instituting a change.
All right. Yes, thank you so much for all these excellent insights. If people want to follow you, what would be or reach out to you, what would be the best place? Is it like LinkedIn, Twitter, email? What way would you prefer?
Well, it's funny because as an ex-tweep, I can't stand being on Twitter anymore. So I basically stopped using Twitter. As someone who lives in the EU, I can't really use Threads because it's forbidden for me to use Threads, and I can't do anything with it. And I don't use Instagram anymore, and I don't use Facebook anymore. So I'm basically not on social media anymore, thanks to Elon. But normally I'm Cool Ass Puppy. On every channel, I'm always Cool Ass Puppy. So you can try and reach out to me on one of those channels, and you can try and reach out to me on LinkedIn if you'd like as well.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks again for joining me today. And I would say talk soon.
Cool. Thank you. It was great being here.
All right. Bye-bye.